Looking up rules is boring and lame, except with very specific types of players, in which case that can also be fun for them. It's kind of true that D&D is like pizza, but there are unique insights when you decide to kind of sit in the player seat and just think about your character. And the biggest eye-opener to me was tips, huh? Tips for a first-timer. Don't stress too much about the rules. Everybody messes up rules. I would generally not recommend anybody ever, unless they're very sure of themselves at the table. You don't want to be in a situation where you're all sitting there like looking up rules in a book. You'll kill momentum. Just agree to a decision that the table can agree with on whatever ruling and just move on. Looking up rules is boring and lame, except with very specific types of players, in which case that can also be fun for them. But generally speaking, you just want to make a call and move on and not stress too much about little things like that. Almost any disagreement about rules at the table can be solved with a dice roll. So never be afraid to liberally use dice. Plus, it's fun to roll dice. We're going to be really good at improv, to be able to make stuff up on the spot and to be quick thinking like that. This won't help, but that's one unique thing about D&D that you can't practice, unfortunately. Like you can't practice ahead of time. The practice is at the table because you don't know what that's like until you're doing it. So that's the good and the bad, right? Because, well, on the good side of it, you don't need to worry too much about preparing for improv, but it's going to happen to you no matter what. It's kind of like trying to prepare for, like, I don't know, preparing for like the cold feeling of the ocean. It's like, I mean, you don't really need to prepare for it, but you're going to have to feel it. You're going to have to step in and deal with it. And if there's something big, unless it's in like the first 10, 15 minutes of you playing, it's okay to say, that's really interesting, and we'll find out what happens after I grab another drink, go to the bathroom, like insert a break for yourself, which most DMs need to do anyway, most tables need to do more of, and that gives you a chance getting a drink or going to the bathroom to go, okay, what do I do now? I did that in my first ever game with a new group, playing all together in a brand new campaign that I kicked off. It was my second campaign technically, and I did a video about this because I just totally planned poorly and allowed them to just divert all of my prep to work. It's the first session, and I have a plan. The players are off on a simple task in the forest, and I thought I would interrupt them with a goblin patrol. They would search out the goblin camp out of concern for their town and have a big fun boss fight. Okay, so the players spotted the goblin patrol, and the sorcerer cast sleep. It was a good roll, and there were only 2 goblins. Okay, it's an easy fight then. Now the barbarian picked up the sleeping goblins by their ankles and hurled them off into the trees. Oh, wow. So now I guess session 1, it went off the rails, and we still had like tons of time left, and I'm thinking, which is funny looking back because now I totally know how I would handle it. But at the time, I had to take a break and just go like, what do I do now? And what I did was not great. And maybe sometimes what you do won't be great, but it's your first time, so don't stress about it. That's how it goes. Oh, they'll have fun. KG220. That's one thing you do not need to worry about. It's kind of true that D&D is like pizza, right? Even bad pizza is still pretty good. It's pizza. The way that I would describe it, though, is that people can choose to have fun no matter what kind of game is in front of them. If it's their style, if it's not their style, if it's a good night or a bad night, having fun is a choice everybody at the table gets to make, which is awesome. But also, you're brand new, so everybody knows that. Everybody, assuming the best out of people, they get that. It's all uphill, right? In a good way. It's all just going to get better every time. Yeah, and actually, no matter what level it is, I would generally argue that people not having fun is probably never the DM's fault. Now, identifying mismatches between, players and DMs, that can be everybody's fault, right? Because at a certain point, it's like, hey, we run a game that's like hack and slash, and you want to run a game that's very role play heavy. Yeah, at a certain point, part ways. But everybody gets to decide as they sit down if they're going to choose to have fun or not. Especially, by the way, this is something that I didn't realize. There's a lot of things they say like, oh, you should be a player first before you're a DM. I don't necessarily agree. I was a dungeon master from the very beginning, but there are unique insights when you decide to kind of sit in the player seat and just think about your character. And the biggest eye opener to me was, and granted, I was playing a wizard, but still, I was like, there is so much interesting and fun stuff for me to do to be creative with between role playing and decision making and what my character can say and choices and spells and all my little side adventures and projects that I want to do and talking to characters in the world. Yeah, kind of a load came off my mind a little bit because active players can really generate their own fun in this game. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't help, right? We want to help, of course, as DMs to do the best that we can. But yeah, it was a really nice realization that players can do as much as they can. That helps me a lot. Great players realize that like other people's fun is also fun, and like everybody at the table needs to fall in love with all of the characters at the table, and then you're basically watching, best possible show when you're not the one in the driver's seat. These guys have big old dongly eyes. I like that. Honestly, the fact that you care this much means you're going to be awesome. Everybody here, by and large, is a very thoughtful like player and DM. Otherwise, if they're not, this becomes a very boring channel. I think there are so many people out there that treat the game as very sort of either like self-service, selfishly, I guess, or you know, cynically. And so even just being as thoughtful about the game as you are says a lot, and like you're gonna have a good time.